Heyo, Greg Branos for the Coachspeak Index. Yeah. Yes. What's up? Back with another fantastic episode. This episode is so good, I'm dizzy right now. Maybe it's the low blood sugar, but I'm pretty sure it's how phenomenal, incredible, outstanding this episode is. Had Scott Barrett of Fantasy Points on to talk about the under-the-radar scheme changes and personnel philosophy changes that a lot of people aren't talking about, but I think are going to help shape this 2025 fantasy football season. Such a great show. Time flew by recording this, and I think it'll fly by when you listen to it, especially if you put it on like 1.5 speed. It'll literally fly by. Such a great time. Really love this episode. You know what else I love? Underdog Fantasy. Ooh, Mr. Segway over here, huh? Got a little QR code. If you're not playing on Underdog Fantasy, I don't know why you would not be. Correct yourself, please. Got a QR code in the bottom left-hand corner here in the description. If you're an audio listener, get up to $1,000 in bonus cash plus a free pick'em. We are always posting pick'ems in the Coachspeak Index Discord. Got a lot of stuff that I like for this week of the preseason. Obviously, the season-long stuff, which we also post on Twitter. Got some pretty great closing line value on a bunch of stuff we posted earlier in the season, like Emeka Egbuka, Garrett Wilson, bunch of those guys. And get yourself $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick'em. And maybe use that pick'em on Cam Scatterboo. Higher than 3.5 rushing touchdowns. I'll keep talking about it, okay? I'm going to keep talking about Scatterboo rushing touchdowns. 97th percentile in success rate on short yardage. He's incredible. He's an elite short yardage runner, an elite goal line back. It's not going to be Tyrone Tracy in there at the goal line, Mr. Fumble Hands. No. It's going to be the guy who gets it done when you hand him the ball in short yardage. It's going to be Scatterboo. Scattaboys, where you at? All right. Why don't we just get right into the show? Okay, here we go. Scott Barrett of Fantasy Points. How you doing, pal?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to be here. Big fan of Coachspeak Index. Excited to chop it up with you. Show sheet looks great.
Yeah, man. I'm last year I did, divisional previews, whatever. A lot of people do those. Would have liked to have done them again this year, but there's just like so much going on. I knew I wouldn't have time, but I thought it'd be cool to just touch on some other topics and stuff that maybe people aren't really talking about, but should be talking about. So today
this is what I'm going to tell my followers and subscribers. No one has their finger on the pulse better than Coachspeak Index.
I appreciate that. It's I feel very locked in, and maybe it's the 70 hours per week of watching press conferences and consuming all the other information that's out there. But I love it. It's great. I use the analogy of I feel like a prospector who's going to pan for some gold, and like I know I'm going to find gold today in these press conferences. I don't know how big the nuggets will be. I don't know how many there will be, but I know there will be gold in these yonder presser hills. So it's fun to wake up in the morning and just wonder, what will we hear today? Will the Bears beat writers finally ask a question about Roschon Johnson today? Through 22 Ben Johnson pressers, nothing so far, nothing in the Declan
Are we
Doyle.
sure he's on the team? What's going on here?
He may have just been a figment of our imagination the entire time. The real Roschon Johnson was the friends we made along the way.
Maybe there's nothing to ask just because it's so obvious. Like he's just tearing up camp every single day,
Right. I think even if it's obvious, like you still have to ask those questions. And we do those questions in a lot of press conferences, stuff that like seems pretty obvious, but like you still just have to ask and like make sure. Like last year, we didn't really get any questions about Christian McCaffrey being out during training camp. Like people just assumed he'd be completely fine. And then we got a question like the week leading up to the game. Sometimes you just gotta ask the obvious question, even if it's like one of your 2 or 3 questions that you get in that press conference. Like somebody just needs to bite the bullet and ask it. But today we are going to talk about some under the radar scheme changes that we maybe should expect this year in the NFL, things that can shape the fantasy season for us. Also a few possible personnel changes. And I want to start with the Kansas City Chiefs and them talking about how they want to get back to the deep passing game. Offensive coordinator Matt Nagy on June 4th said that he and Patrick Mahomes spent an inordinate amount of time breaking down downfield throws this offseason, watching it together. Said, quote, "For what it's worth, at the end of the Eagles game, I know the score wasn't what we wanted, but there was a pretty good throw at the end of the year there to Xavier, and I think that we're excited to get back to some of that," end quote. Now,
just for some quick context on that deep shot to Xavier at the end of the season, that was against third string backup cornerbacks in garbage time. But yeah, sorry, go on.
So we have seen Patrick Mahomes light up the NFL on deep throws before. That has not been the case the past couple seasons. He was pretty bad on deep throws last year. What I am wondering is whether a good left tackle has been the missing ingredient that will allow them to get back to these deep passing routes that they're talking about wanting to get back to. Does Josh Simmons allow them to do that this year?
Yeah, so I'd like to dig in deep on this if that's at all possible, just because this is something I've talked about for quite some time. It's something I've went, pseudo viral with a few times. And so like people might not actually know my opinions on it. They'll just see the quick hit on Twitter that goes viral. So just to give my actual take on this, I first started talking about this, was it Brock Purdy's sophomore season, in part because I had money on him to win MVP at 101 odds. So I was very, vocal at trying to promote that. But, the narrative on him was he was just sort of a check down Charlie. And I was saying like, that's not really the case. Like he's way more aggressive than Mahomes is this year. In fact, Mahomes, since Tyreek left, has been the league's biggest check down Charlie, and really like a total non-factor in the deep passing game. And so, Tom Brady gets that narrative too. And like, that was never really the case. Certainly like Patrick Mahomes, way more of a check down merchant, screen merchant, check down Charlie than Tom Brady ever was, like in any season. But here's one of the stats. Since 2001, Mahomes has the most passing yards on throws behind the line of scrimmage. And he has 915 more than the next closest quarterback. He has only 7 deep passing touchdowns over the last 3 seasons. 7. Derek Carr, who is retired, has 27. You mentioned the left tackle. I actually think Kansas City's, maybe not the left tackle as much, but Kansas City's offensive line play has always been among the best in the league. I don't really think that explains it. I don't think the rise in cover 2, the rise in too high explains it, because we saw a below average rate of both last year. What I think is that I'm not going to say, Mahomes isn't an elite quarterback, the best quarterback, no worse than second best. But I do think he was for sure propped up by Tyreek Hill early in his career. This is one of my hot takes, is that I think Tyreek Hill is probably the best wide receiver we've seen over the past 15 years, ahead of a Julio Jones, ahead of an Antonio Brown. And I think NFL personnel would largely agree with that, just in terms of how he forced a defensive coordinator to game plan around him and stop him, and he still couldn't stop him. And then look at who was the most underrated wide receiver the past 15 years. I think that was Deshaun Jackson. Both elite deep threats. Deshaun Jackson, probably the biggest quarterback elevator of all time. You really see that in the numbers. Every quarterback he's ever had. You look at their EPA per dropback splits with him on or off the field. Will Fuller, too, same exact thing. All three elite deep threats. And so you look at Tyreek Hill's quarterbacks. Alex Smith, before Tyreek Hill, was the definition of a conservative check down Charlie with limited arm strength. In an article, I said he's like less a man, more just like the Joseph Campbell, like archetype of quarterback with limited arm strength, but great accuracy in the short to intermediate. But then he gets that season with Tyreek in 2017, where he leads the league in passer rating. He leads the league in deep passing yards with like 3 times as much as he's had in any other year of his career. And then you saw Tua Tagovailoa. It was the same thing. Before Mike McDaniel and Tyreek got there, they were saying he should get benched. They were saying he was a bust. They were saying he's Alex Smith 2.0. He's a check down Charlie. He has no arm strength. He's nothing. It doesn't have a deep ball. The ball just dies on him once it gets the 15-yard marker. And then boom, he gets Tyreek, and he leads the league in deep passing yards in 2023. And then you look at Mahomes with Tyreek, leads the league in deep passing yards every year. Look at him without Tyreek. What did I say? Derek Carr 3 times as many deep passing touchdowns. And so I think quarterbacks generally are much more of a product than their supporting cast than we want to admit. And particularly the case when it's a super elite talent like a Tyreek Hill. And some more negativity thrown Mahomes' way. He was Fantasy Points Data's second least accurate quarterback on balls thrown 10 plus yards down the field. This is on a bottom 5 list that includes Deshaun Watson, Cooper Rush, Anthony Richardson, Gardner Minshew. Only 44% of his yards were catchable. Only 47% of his open air yards were catchable. These are bottom 5 numbers. These are really, I'm sorry. I'm talking about, I jumped ahead. This is Xavier Worthy. So you look at Xavier Worthy last year, who I don't think is a Tyreek Hill. But what went wrong there? Was it Xavier Worthy? Was it Patrick Mahomes? But you look at Worthy's numbers, like I said, only 44% of his air yards were catchable. Only 47% of his open air yards were catchable. These are bottom 5 numbers in Fantasy Points Data history. That doesn't look great for Mahomes. But where this gets interesting is, one, this is a really good regression to the mean stat, meaning it could just be the case that this is like really bad luck, and it's going to regress to the mean, because, minus Tyreek Hill and minus Xavier Worthy, who were the Patrick Mahomes deep threats, MVS, like not guys we would say are super talented. Xavier Worthy, you spend that round 1 pick on him, fastest wide receiver of all time, and you have these numbers which aren't good for Mahomes, but maybe it regresses the mean as 1. And then 2, maybe it's actually an Xavier Worthy stat. This is what Brett Whitefield, our film expert over at Fantasy Points, talks about. Is he said coming out, he said it again last year, is Xavier Worthy doesn't know how to track a deep ball. And this is one of the craziest stats I had when Xavier Worthy was coming out, was that, he was the fastest wide receiver ever, but he's also one of the worst deep threats ever in college. He averaged just 9.2 yards per target on deep passes. That ranks second worst of any round 1 or 2 wide receiver this past decade. But, just like last year in college, inordinately low percentage of his targets were catchable. Maybe that's the deep tracking thing influencing that. Maybe it's just Quinn Ewers was terrible. And so I understand I'm kind of monologuing here for quite some time, but so personally, like I think it's just Mahomes isn't as good at this as we all like to think. I really think this was mostly a Tyreek thing. I do think Mahomes is one of the best quarterbacks in football, but I think that has more to do with escapability in the pocket, like elite pressure to sack ratio, him and Josh Allen, no one else coming close, rather than accuracy. Like Tyreek, when he went to Miami, he said, guys, Tua's more accurate than Mahomes, and he got like clowned on for that. But I kind of think that's true. I think Mahomes is great. I just don't think he's the most accurate quarterback ever. So anyway, I just think this is a really interesting question is, can the Chiefs get back to a deep passing game of old? I'm a little more pessimistic. I kind of don't think they can ever really get back to the Tyreek era. But I do think it'll be better than last year. I could see that. Like I said, maybe the Worthy stuff was, just running bad, a little bit of bad luck. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, first of all, Tyreek Hill was so good in Kansas City that he caught a deep touchdown and didn't even know that he had caught a touchdown in 2020. I don't know if you remember that game. I think it was like a Monday night game, and that was just like automatically what I thought of when you were talking about his time in KC. It was really shocking last year how off that Mahomes to Worthy connection was, right? You draft a guy in Xavier Worthy in the first round with that blazing speed. Like that's why you're drafting him, to pair him with Mahomes, to recreate that magic that Mahomes and Tyreek Hill had previously. And I do wonder about, how the offense would have looked if we get a complete season of Rashee Rice there with Travis Kelce. There, you have these two just legitimate threats in the intermediate part of the field. Kelce getting a little old in the tooth, but like still very good in that part of the field. Rashee Rice, we know he's incredible at that short and intermediate stuff, and defenses have to press up as a result of that, which kind of opens things up for Xavier Worthy. But then, Mahomes throws that pick, obliterates Rashee Rice's knee, and then all of a sudden, Xavier Worthy is tasked with a lot of the Rashee Rice intermediate stuff while still running some of the deep routes. I do think the left tackle like plays a little bit into it, because people were just blowing by that spot last year so often, and that usually is going to lead to more like, all right, well, we got to get the ball out quick because we don't really have time to take deep shots. And then when he does take those deep shots, he's off by like 5 yards or whatever. And maybe some of it is, some of that blame can be assigned to Xavier Worthy for not being on the same page. But listen, on those plays where he's wide open by like 5 yards, you got to hit him there. You're the best quarterback in the NFL. Like, show it. Like, let's hit this guy in stride. This year it looks like we're going to be without Rashee Rice for several games again. Probably between 4 and 8 games. So, like, how does that work out? Is it going to be the same thing kind of that we saw last year with Xavier Worthy getting that Rashee Rice work? I believe that they truly do want to get back to the deep passing stuff. They talked about it last offseason. They're talking about it this offseason, but it's very much easier said than done. But I do think they will make an honest attempt at that, because if Mahomes and Worthy can get on the same page and they can recreate that deep connection that the Chiefs had several years ago, then that makes them a super, super dangerous offense again.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that was a great point, is like Rashee Rice is, maybe that's mutually beneficial where he's drawing coverage short, opening things up deep, because they really didn't have much beyond like a sort of washed Travis Kelce and Xavier Worthy. But I kind of hate Patrick Mahomes at current ADP QB6. Like I think he's way over. Like he finished outside of the top 12 quarterbacks in each of the last 2 seasons. So I kind of think that's a mistake. I've argued Xavier Worthy at his current cost is like one of the worst picks you can make. I just think like this offense, maybe they try and expand the deep game more, but really the past 2 years, they've been so content to win with the deep ball. I know, sorry, the ground game and their defense. And Rashee Rice, when he is on the field, is like such an alpha. I don't know that there's much room for anything else. You look at Xavier Worthy last year, like was not productive. Over his last 10 weeks, like 42% of his targets came on screens. That's not going to happen again. You know this as the Coachspeak index guy, right? Is what was the quote on Xavier Worthy? We're excited to get Rashee Rice back, so Worthy can focus a little bit more on special teams, something like that.
That doesn't, like, from this season, that doesn't ring a bell. They were talking about recently Matt Nagy was talking about the levels that these guys are at, talking about how, Rashee Rice is level 303. Xavier Worthy is now like graduated to 202. He's in his second year in the system. And like Jalen Royals, I think that's the one is Jalen Royals. They were talking about him being level 101. And I think they were talking about maybe his contribution on special teams. But
let me pull up the exact quote I had. Yeah. Maybe I'm misremembering it, but it's Worthy. Now, if you remember Worthy, he was going to be our guy. He planned on being our guy until Rashee Rice got hurt, and that changed everything for the dynamic. He ended up being the number 1 for us last year, so we couldn't afford to have him back there. I say he's the best punt returner nobody knows about right now in the league, and that's Worthy. So hopefully we get him back out there too. This was from Dave Tube, who is the assistant head coach and special teams coordinator. Mm-hmm. But it's possible I'm being maybe a little too hard on him. We have Scott DiBenedetto, who's one of our writers over at Fantasy Points. He was a scout with the Browns for 10 years. I kind of thought I kind of been kind of hard on Xavier Worthy as a talent. But he has an article coming out this week where he thinks a year from now, we're viewing Worthy as one of the top 3 wide receivers in that class, like above a Ladd McConkey. He thinks he can be Tyreek Hill. We have some guys on our staff who disagree with that. Brett Whitefield, for instance, but it's possible I'm underrating the talent here. Did you find that quote at all compelling?
No, because I don't mind a coach or team talking about a player being involved in special teams when they're talking about the return game. If they're talking about them being, how important they are as a gunner on special teams, that's a completely different thing to me. Like the return stuff is completely fine. Like, yeah, he's super, super fast and, pretty good with the ball in his hand.
Yeah, maybe I'm greedy and I just want to hear like Jameson Williams level hype where it's like, oh, he's routing dudes up. We want to get him in the slot, blah, blah, blah. But yeah,
it just his fantasy season seems so dependent on that deep connection working for them. So, what you're saying about Patrick Mahomes's ADP, yeah, maybe it's a little bit inflated, but I think in, for instance, in like a best ball tournament, if you're taking Xavier Worthy, you're making a bet that this deep game is going to work this year. And then it's fine to take Patrick Mahomes, because if Xavier Worthy isn't working out, then Patrick Mahomes isn't working out either.
Yeah, I'll end on this and I'll just say the deep game hasn't worked since Tyreek Hill left in 2021. And when I say not worked, I mean it's really been like at a bottom 7 level. But who knows? Maybe Xavier Worthy can be that difference maker.
Yeah, and
the left tackle.
So like those kinds of situations where like we haven't seen it for the past year or the past couple of years or whatever, and then all of a sudden it changes, and it changes when nobody is really expecting it to change or like even really talking or thinking about it. I mean, kind of the reason for this show is like just very under the radar things that like people aren't really expecting or talking about.
So I feel like it's priced in though. When you're talking about a QB6, a QB6 ADP for a guy who hasn't finished top 12 in each of the last 2 years. But I mean, like, hey, if he just goes back to being, 2019, 2020, 2021 Mahomes, then I guess you're right. Then that's like one of the best picks he could have made.
Yeah. Let's move on to the Seattle Seahawks. When Mike McDonald took over as head coach last season, he said, we're going to establish the run. Under offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb, they ended up passing on 62.8% of their plays, which was the 5th highest rate in the NFL in 2024. McDonald fired Grubb and then hired Clint Kubiak as their new offensive coordinator. I think this will now be a run-heavy offense to fulfill Mike McDonald's vision. A lot of 12 and 21 personnel, which also means fewer 3 wide receiver sets for Seattle. I'll just bring up this quote here real quick. This was Clint Kubiak on February 11th. He said, Kenneth Walker could fit into about any run style. He's a talented player. I'm really excited about him in this zone scheme, but I've seen Ken play really good football in all schemes. I've seen him catch the ball out of the backfield, which I think is really important for our backs. Whatever we can do to get them touches, throwing them routes out of the backfield, throwing them screens, getting the ball in their hands, getting the ball to our best runners, and that's what Kenneth Walker is. And I think he's got a really good group of teammates who complement him, especially with Zach Charbonnet. Looking forward to Kenneth Walker in this scheme, and we're going to ask a lot out of him. What is your feeling and your outlook on this Seahawks offense?
So obviously extremely bullish for Kenneth Walker if he can stay healthy. You just watched the preseason and I was just like, guys, imagine Kenneth Walker in the George Holani role. For those who don't know, George Holani, who probably most people haven't heard of, 7 carries, 61 rushing yards, 1 touchdown, had a 20-yard catch as well. And you saw what Clint Kubiak did last year with Alvin Kamara, major yards per carry bump, but then, massive involvement in the passing game. And we all saw what Christian McCaffrey did with Kubiak the year before that, where he he outscored all other fantasy running backs by over 100 fantasy points. Our guy, Brett Whitefield, great film expert, has been telling us all offseason, this outside zone heavy Kubiak scheme is perfect for Kenneth Walker. And you do kind of see that in 2022, Kenneth Walker averaged 5.6 yards per carry on outside zone. It was really the only year he had more than just like a handful of outside zone carries. It's one of the best, marks in fantasy points data history. But we haven't seen the Seahawks run it. Last year, they were just at 19% of their runs were outside zone, but Kubiak's offenses the last 2 years were typically at 40, 43%. So again, that's a great fit. This is a very running back centric offense for a play caller who has a tremendous track record, and whose father had a tremendous track record. I forget my stat, but it was something like Gary Kubiak's offenses ranked top 5 in rushing yards in like 12 of his 12 career seasons as a offensive coordinator. And so like, obviously we should be really bullish on Kenneth Walker should he stay healthy, or Zach Charbonnet as a handcuff should Kenneth Walker not be able to stay healthy. But I think there's like another interesting wrinkle here, and that's that we should expect heavy 2 wide receiver sets. So 12 personnel, 21 personnel. And it's better. It's easier to run in those formations. So that's a little boost to Kenneth Walker, but like people aren't talking about it enough. It's like a major boost to those 2 wide receivers when they're on those field in those 2 wide receiver sets. There's a great stat from Ryan Heath, who just released an article on every play caller. When there's 2 or fewer wide receivers on the field, those wide receivers see a 32% increase in fantasy points per route run. Why is that the case? It's because there's lesser target competition. Competing against two other wide receivers for the ball is a lot tougher than one wide receiver and two tight ends, or one wide receiver and two running backs and a tight end. So yeah, that we should be expecting a pretty heavy efficiency boost for instance, Jackson Smith and Jigba. The Seahawks played 11 personnel at one of the top 3 highest rates last year. So just from that change, we should expect, improved numbers, I think, from JSN, especially if you think Cooper Kupp is washed. So again, lesser target competition for him, or maybe you think Cooper Kupp's not washed and he's like one of the best picks you can make in drafts. What do you think?
Yeah, so Clint Kubiak last year as offensive coordinator in New Orleans ran 2 receiver sets at a clip of over 50%. So yeah, we're seeing, like you said, a consolidation of the pass catchers out there, of the targets. I think Torrey Horton has a chance, and I just talked about this with Pat Crane on a late round darts episode, but I think Torrey Horton has, first of all, great shot at overtaking Marquez Valdez-Scantling as wide receiver 3. Mike McDonald just said in a press conference last week before the preseason game that MVS is in a battle for his job. You don't usually hear coaches saying that about, veteran wide receivers on their team who are kind of slated to be starters. So that was really eye-opening. And then, of course, we get the really good Torrey Horton performance in the preseason game. And then Cooper Kupp being let go by the Rams, who Sean McVay and Les Snead love this guy like a son. No one knows more about Cooper Kupp than the Los Angeles Rams, and they had zero intention of bringing him back. Even if no other team was going to sign him, McVay still would not commit to Cooper Kupp coming back to the Rams. They were just completely done with him. And it's obviously not any kind of attitude thing or off-field stuff. As a person, love him like a son. So that's, I think, a huge red flag for, what Cooper Kupp is capable of at this point in his career. So I think Torrey Horton has a chance to, kind of jump him as wide receiver 2 by the time we're getting to the fantasy playoffs. And that would be really, really big to be able to get a guy like that in the last round of drafts who's going to be on the field in 2 wide receiver sets at the end of the year. As far as the run game, I have a lot of Kenneth Walker this year. I'm also making sure to get a lot of Zach Charbonnet, just given Kenneth Walker's injury history. I think it's one of those backfields that it's I've thought about, what if you did drafts and just with certain teams, you decided I'm going to take one of their running backs in every draft pretty much, right? I think you could do that with Seattle. If you don't get Kenneth Walker, you can get Zach Charbonnet, and one of these guys is going to hit pretty hard. If Kenneth Walker is healthy, I think it's Kenneth Walker. And then if something happens to Kenneth Walker, which has happened many times before now, then Zach Charbonnet is the dude for Seattle. And he's he's a good running back. He's a very good running back. The wild card, I think, in Seattle this year is going to be, how does this offensive line perform? They were pretty bad last year. They spent a first round pick on Gray Zabel this year. Just drafting that one guy isn't going to fix everything. Hopefully, Abe Lucas and Charles Cross, their tackles, can stay healthy this year. That's another thing that has not really been the case health-wise for those guys. But we know that Clint Kubiak wants to run this wide zone scheme, and they have these athletic offensive linemen who can do all these pin and pulls and everything that Clint Kubiak wants to do. It's just at what level are they going to do it? We know that they're absolutely going to try and commit to the run. And if Kenneth Walker is healthy, I think he could have a really big season. And again, this is, before last year, people thought Kenneth Walker can't catch the ball. Well, it's not that he can't catch the ball. It's that he had never really been asked to be a pass catcher. They never threw the ball
when at was it Michigan State, right? When he was there, you have to go back to high school for, to see him getting targets. And then Ryan Grubb comes in last year and says, Kenneth Walker can catch the ball and we're going to throw him a lot of targets. And they did. And he showed that he's, very, very capable of that. And now we get Clint Kubiak saying, like, we want to use Kenneth Walker a lot. We want to use him in the run game and we want to use him in the pass game as well. So super, super bullish for Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's really one of my top conviction plays. It's the problem with him though is like we know what the issue is. It's just a matter of can he stay healthy. But if he can, this is the best setup he's ever been in. Even with this, probably worst in the league offensive line. Like I am just so convicted in Kubiak being able to maximize his talents, and I do think he's super talented. Like you said, he was really strong as a pass catcher last year. He's always been a missed tackle force machine. And I think with this outside zone scheme, perfect for his skill sets and athleticism, he could have a killer year. One thing I did want to push back on, and I don't know how strongly I believe in this, at least from a start sit perspective. This is one of my galaxy brain takes of the offseason. I think every year there's like 5 or 6 guys where we just like stop thinking rationally about collectively, like the entire community, where it's just like someone says, oh, this guy's washed. And then everyone is just like, oh yeah, he's washed. And we just like don't think any more deeply about it. And I'm looking at Cooper Kupp, who ADP wide receiver 51 on Underdog, which is a tournament style format with a $1 million grand prize where you really want to lean into upside. And we know Cooper Kupp has flashed like the best upside that's ever existed. He has the most fantasy points in any season of any wide receiver ever. And so like contrasting that upside with like the risk that he's washed, even if we agree it's like the most likely scenario, I think you have to pass on him at that ADP. You have to feel like it's 99% that he's just like totally cooked, because you look at the numbers. 2021 scored the most fantasy points ever. 2022 was the wide receiver 1 by fantasy points per game. 2023 was the wide receiver 23 by fantasy points per game. And then last year, weeks 1 through 12, 20.1 fantasy points per game, second among all wide receivers. And like, okay, yeah, he sucked over the last 4 weeks. Maybe he was hurt. Or like, I don't know, like, isn't it better to be amazing for 12 straight weeks and then suck for 4 weeks than to, just be mid the entire time, because it's upside that really matters in the game of fantasy football. And so to your point, like the Rams love this guy. They wash their hands of him, but devil's advocate is the Seahawks like it. And that's the team he's on now. They're paying Cooper Kupp more guaranteed money than Stephon Diggs got, than Devontae Adams got. And so, yeah, you're looking at a player who, over the last 4 years, only Justin Jefferson averages more fantasy points per game. Even over the last 2 years, when he's like supposedly washed, he's 20th in fantasy points per game, ahead of Drake London, ahead of Jalen Waddle, ahead of JSN by a landslide. And so to me, again, I don't really draft a lot of underdog teams, but I feel like I would have heavy exposure in my, for my draft guide, which is more like redraft start sit leagues. I'm only like a little above consensus, but I don't know. It's something I keep having to bring up just because, what if we all just wrote this guy off as washed, and then he comes out week 1, week 2, week 3, and he's getting 8, 9, 10 targets? Would we really be that shocked? Of course, then he'd get hurt week 6 or something. But what do you think? Am I just like smoking crack, or is there something here?
No, I don't think so. I don't think you can say like 100% definitively wash. I just think there are some like pretty big red flags there. But like you make a good point of, this is a guy who, we talk about these older receivers, right, who are falling off the age cliff, and a lot of times it's guys with speed, right? Like a Tyreek Hill is getting old now, and that speed eventually kind of just isn't there anymore. But with guys like Devontae Adams last year, still really good and technically proficient. Like those guys don't lose that. They're still master craftsmen when it comes to route running. And I think, you could definitely put Cooper Kupp into that category. So yeah, in an offense where you're going to have a lot of 2 wide receiver sets, I could absolutely see games where he's getting, 8, 9 targets there.
I just want to say, like, that is a killer point. Is no one ages more gracefully in the NFL than the, a little less athletic, but like route running technician slot wide receiver. You saw that with Larry Fitzgerald late in his career. You're seeing that even now with Keenan Allen. And then last year, we all wrote Devontae Adams off. Like, he looked terrible. And then Jets halfway through the season move him into the slot. And he has this big resurgence late.
Yeah. Adam Thielen last year for the Panthers at what, like 34, 35 years old. Like pretty incredible stuff. Moving on to Chicago. I mean, there are several things to talk about here with the Bears. This one might go a while. I'll just hit all 3 points real quick of things that are going to be like big changes here. First of all, they're transitioning Caleb Williams from being a shotgun quarterback, which he's been like his entire career since high school, to an under center quarterback. And they were talking in training camp, or before training camp, actually, like after the draft, they were talking about how they want to make this transition, and they'll see how it goes, and hopefully it goes well. If not, they might have to pivot. But to me, it sounded like they're just very, very dead set on making him an under center quarterback. Then you also have this emphasis on raising his EPA via yards after the catch. Ben Johnson saying, you would ask someone, how do you know, like, what's the most important thing in determining the outcome of a game? And people would always say, well, turnovers. You have to win the turnover battle, especially on offense. And that's incorrect. Actually, the best way, like the best predictor of whether you're going to win a game or not, is your quarterback's EPA. So we're not going to take a lot of deep shots. We are just going to focus on raising Caleb Williams' EPA. And then you see the Bears go and draft Colston Loveland at number 10 overall, Luther Burden at 39 overall. And then lastly, another kind of scheme change thing here is, which you very well know because you've been holding on to this quote for forever, is Ben Johnson saying, wherever I have been, the slot receiver is a focal point of my offense. So three, kind of different points that actually all kind of converge together. What do you think about this Bears offense with Ben Johnson now?
Yeah, so one by one, he wants to move to under center. The reason he wants to do that is like the new NFL meta in the post spread world is you really have to marry that running game with the passing game. And under center makes play action so much more effective, which is like one of the most potent efficiency hacks that exist in today's NFL. And like Ben Johnson was, very so play action heavy at his time in Detroit. I think you do it. I think that's smart. My only question is like, how much do we trust that Chicago run game to keep defenses honest? The forgotten man, Roschon Johnson, did average 2.9 yards per carry last year. DeAndre Swift, when Ben Johnson had him last, he was averaging like 6 carries per game. But that's number one. Number two was what?
The QB EPA, raising that.
So
and actually, sorry to interrupt. One of the funniest, like most kind of like wildest things that I've heard this offseason was their offensive coordinator, Declan Doyle, saying that every day they take a sheet that shows the completion percentage for the quarterbacks and like all the throws that they've made and everything. They show and they go into the quarterback room, they show it to the quarterbacks and they tell them whether or not it is championship material that they like a championship performance that they delivered that day.
What are these said exactly the number they're trying to get Caleb Williams at? Was it 80%?
I believe it's 70%.
70. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Caleb was at 62.5%. But he threw a ton of screens. I think Chicago led the league in screen pass attempts last year. So you would really expect it to be higher. Completion percentage over expectation was well, this is the thing is I'm a pretty big Caleb hater, or at least just, I think his rookie season was historically awful. I think it was one of the worst rookie seasons we've ever seen, up there with the Zach Wilsons and Justin Fields of the world. Like, forget rookie seasons, just like one of the worst seasons, at least in fantasy points data history, by pressure to sack ratio, which is one of the best, stickiest stats we have for a quarterback. This is on the quarterback. It's not on the offensive line. And this is something Caleb Williams really dealt with in college as well. It was the worst pressure to sack ratio in fantasy points data history, with at least 350 dropbacks. Will Levis was worse, but I don't think he met that threshold. By catchable throw rate, it was also worst in fantasy points data history with that many dropbacks. In terms of deep passing, it was the worst season in fantasy points data history by catchable throw rate or off-target throw rate on deep passes. That's balls thrown 20 plus yards in the air. So absolutely historically awful season. I think the offensive line was like average. A lot of people blame the offensive line. I think it was average. I think the supporting cast from a receiver perspective is like good. DJ Moore, top 12 highest paid wide receiver. Keenan Allen, almost Hall of Fame level receiver. Rome Odunze, a top 10 pick. All guys who were like elite with the deep ball in recent seasons, or in Rome Odunze's case, going back to college. And so this was all awful. The supporting cast, like you said, is much better. Top 10 pick on a tight end, round 2 pick on a slot. Their offensive line, I think, is going to be like top 7 this year. Love their offensive line, the changes they made. That was Ben Johnson's priority number 1. So just given how, he was such a prolific sack eater and how he really struggled deep, I do think it makes sense. When Ben Johnson says, let's get that completion percentage up, what that means to me is we're dropping the ADOT, fewer deep pass attempts, again, heavy screens, a lot of dump offs to the running back, get the ball out quick because, he has this issue taking sacks. And so from a fantasy perspective, I'm wondering about a DeAndre Swift, sort of like Cooper Kupp, where I don't know that I'm like putting my money where my mouth is, but I'm wondering if we're sleeping on. Beats haven't asked about Roschon Johnson and his 2.9 yards per carry last year once this offseason, right? Mm-hmm. I know DeAndre didn't get a ton of run last time he was with Ben Johnson, but he does know the offense. He does know what Ben Johnson wants. And he's a great pass catcher. Like, is this a guy who could finish top 3, top 5 at the position in targets? I can see that. And then what if he leads the team in carries? That's not really Ben Johnson's MO, but like, given who they have on the roster besides him, like, it's not the most shocking thing in the world. And then, the Ben Johnson slot thing is one, I've been talking about for years now. I had a tweet where it's like, whenever Ben Johnson goes to a team and becomes the head coach, we are going to be all in on his slot wide receiver. Mm-hmm. And so there's a question is like, is actually Kostin Loveland the secret slot receiver? And there's a lot of 12 personnel in this offense. That's a question. Or is it Luther Burden? Luther Burden right now, vibes aren't great. But with rookies, sometimes you see the second half explosion where maybe he has like an Amon-Ra type rookie season where, he's on waivers week 5, but those last 6 weeks, he's a big difference maker. So I don't know. I'm really bullish on Loveland. I'm really bullish on Luther Burden. And then there's a flip side to this too, depending on how real we think this Ben Johnson's slot thing is, because, since he, first got into the league, Jarvis Landry, was leading the league in receptions, much to people's surprise. And then, Danny Amendola, 35 years old, was getting peppered. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, not a round 1 draft pick, went on to do crazy things. So you could play it by betting on Luther Burden or Colston Loveland. But you could also play like the reverse of that too. You could also be down on Amon-Ra this year. You could be high on Jameson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta relative to Amon. I think we'll get to that in a little bit, but I personally think that's really real. But what do you think?
Well, I mean, the slot receiver thing makes sense when we're talking about Ben Johnson's philosophy on offense of like, all right, let's get these high percentage throws to guys that can do things with the ball in their hands and like just let them work their magic. So I'm very curious if that slot receiver ends up being one guy for Ben Johnson, or is it, a mix of, all right, it's a little bit of Colston Loveland, it's a little bit of Luther Burden, it's some screens to DJ Moore, and Roma Dunze is played like fine enough in the slot as well. So maybe it's not just one guy. Maybe it's like slot receiver by committee kind of thing there. They have talked about running 12 personnel with Cole Kmet and Colston Loveland. At, when we're talking about fantasy, I'm kind of in the same boat where, well, who are the 2 cheapest guys? It's Colston Loveland, like really late at a very important position in fantasy, tight end. So if he's a guy that's getting, 6-7 targets a game, and we know this guy's like a yak monster, then that's pretty great to get that guy in the 10th, 11th round. And then Luther Burden just keeps falling in drafts because he missed some time in training camp with a hamstring injury. And now we're getting these like compliment or like negative like sandwiches, right, from Ben Johnson, who, like, I think it was yesterday, like said something pretty nice about Luther Burden, but then at the same time, like said something kind of negative about him of like, hey, this guy needs to lock in. He's missed some time. He's got to catch up. And, saying that both he and Loveland have missed some time in training camp. So yeah, they're not like completely up to speed yet, but I mean, I feel really good about Loveland. Burden is just, he came into the league with a little bit of baggage of like being known as a little bit of a diva at Missouri, and like kind of work ethic concerns and all that. As a prospect, just really, really exciting. If he can get his head on straight and stay healthy, I think he could be super, super dangerous in this Bears offense that just wants to shoot the ball out pretty quickly and let super talented guys, do great things with the ball. And Burden and Loveland are 2 of those guys. You mentioned it, and we'll transition into it now about the Detroit Lions. I'll just take us down a little bit of a timeline here on what they've been saying. May 13th, offensive coordinator John Morton said Jameson Williams can go from 0 to 60 fast. It's amazing. I haven't been around a guy like him. I mean, it's 2 players with him and Jahmyr Gibbs, that explosion. I was around Reggie Bush, and that kind of explosion is impressive. Those 2 guys have it. Then later in that same press conference, Morton said, quote, about Jameson Williams, quote, he has been unbelievable. Unbelievable. I'm so excited to see him this year. It's going to be a breakout year for him. So I can't wait. I just can't wait, man. End quote. 2 weeks later, head coach Dan Campbell says the same thing. Quote, we expect him to have a huge season. We really do, man. He's going to be one of these guys that we're going to lean on this year and is really going to be big for us, end quote. And then on June 6th, we get this bombshell quote from Dan Campbell. I kept it in the Coachspeak Index Discord. I did not tweet this out. Dan Campbell says, we've tweaked a few things here and there on offense. It's about what John Morton really wants, how he sees it, how he wants things run, how he wants to isolate certain players. A lot of the focal point was Jamison Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta, among others. I thought we've really honed in on their versatility and all the things they can do. And then, quote, how many times and ways can we isolate one of these guys? I think that's what it comes down to. Get it in their hands and let them go to work and do what they do, end quote. What do you think about what the Lions are saying about these guys?
So I think this is the other side of the Ben Johnson bet. And like, this is something, again, like this is one of my pet takes, just because I've been beating the drum on this for a couple of years now. And it is something Ben Johnson brings up routinely, his love for the slot and how, it's harder for a defensive coordinator to game plan against that, and the different things it opens up for. And so like, yeah, maybe it's just, I don't want to say Amon-Ra is overrated, because I don't think that's the case. I think he's really talented, but I would not be surprised at all if this new offensive play caller changes things up a little bit. And so I wanted to say this too. I think we could be overstating Ben Johnson's impact, because Dan Campbell was asked a few years ago, and like, he was like, about Ben Johnson's play calling. He was kind of like, you guys know, I call some of the plays too. Like it's something of a collaborative effort. And people are like, like he totally transformed Jared Goff. And it's like, what? Well, hold on. Jared Goff sucked with Anthony Lynn, and then Anthony Lynn got fired. Dan Campbell took over play calling duties, and his passer rating skyrocketed. His adjusted net yards per attempt skyrocketed. And it's kind of just stayed the same ever since that. The second half of that year with Dan Campbell, to the next year with Ben Johnson, to the next year with Ben Johnson. So it's possible we could be understating Dan Campbell's impact. And I'm talking to Detroit Lions beat writers and my friends who are at VIP passes to Lions camp. And they're all saying, and maybe Dan Campbell said the same thing actually, but it's basically the same playbook. It's the same exact playbook, but you could still, you've heard that too.
Yeah. He just said like, we've tweaked some things.
Right. So you could have the same playbook, but you can emphasize different players in the game. And I think it kind of makes sense to do that. Again, I don't want to say Amon-Ra St. Brown's underrated, but it's just like, all these guys are awesome. And like, if the slot is like so crucial to Ben Johnson, maybe it's not to this other guy. Maybe what's crucial to him is like super dynamic playmakers. This is one of my favorite stats I found. I tweeted it out and I tagged you in it actually. But so you look at last year, all receivers by yards per target on short to intermediate throws. So just air yards 0 to 15. Who led the league in yards per target on all these throws? Jahmyr Gibbs, 10.8 yards per target on 20 such targets. That's insane. For a running back to do that is so impossible. I think on this list, like there wasn't another running back in the top 45. So apparently like best short to intermediate target is Jahmyr Gibbs. Number 2 was Jamison Williams, 10.5 yards per target on 50 such targets. And then the rest of the list, AJ Brown, George Kittle, all these superstars. And then all the way down the list, 68, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 7.5 yards per target on 103 such targets. And so like, yeah, maybe I love Amon-Ra, but he doesn't have the explosive playability of a Jamison Williams, probably not of a Jahmyr Gibbs. So like, yeah, maybe those guys start getting more work at Amon-Ra's expense. And I've been talking to, my guys who are at Lions camp, and they're like, no, that's exactly what the case. Like you have it in the coach speak and the quotes. My guys who are there are like, I'm seeing Jamison Williams in the slot more often than Amon-Ra, who is more often in the X. And it's like, oh, wow. Cause like, that's going to be higher value, routes, higher value targets from a fantasy perspective. Maybe they're scheming this guy up a little bit more. And I'm talking to my guy at Detroit camp, and he's saying there's a chance Detroit could be even better this year. I kind of think that's impossible, just the bar is so high, but it's like, I don't know. It's not as impossible as maybe everyone is saying. I will say Jameson Williams is like one of these players. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, is easy. It's just like he showed you he could break leagues with like a 50% XFP share. And when David Montgomery's hurt, he's averaging like 30 plus fantasy points per game.
Yeah.
And so just like, what if this new OC is like, yeah, the 50-50 split was stupid. Let's give the guy who led the league in EPA per carry way more carries than the guy who ranked 80th in EPA per carry. So like that one's easy to me. Jameson's a lot tougher. And Ryan Heath and I have debated it quite a bit, because if you look at the analytics, it's so hard to kind of justify Jameson where he's going. I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think it's sort of like Chris Godwin in his year 3, that like breakout year that came out of nowhere, where it's just like, hey, the vibes are really good. And we were just like really confident that this guy's good. Maybe he just like becomes a fantasy wide receiver 1. But it's still, again, it's like, I can't argue with Ryan. It's just like, analytically you're right, but the vibes are really good. And I think he's talented. So it's just like, how much do you weight that? What do you, and then Sam Laporta we can get into too, but it's just like, I think he was hurt all of last year and you kind of just have to throw that out. He was really good down the stretch, but really, route share dropped, target share dropped, and then took him a while to get healthy. What do you think?
Well, it's really funny because, last off season, we start getting this drumbeat about Jameson Williams from Dan Campbell. And he's saying he's pushing to be a full-time starter. He looks incredible. His route running has gotten better, and everyone just blew it off. Right. And they said, no, look at what he's done the past 2 years. People did not want to look at the context, right? Which is like why I preach about context and nuance and all this stuff so often, because you could pull up box scores and you could pull up like Pro Football Reference and whatever and be like, oh, look, the most catches he had in the game was like 4 catches or whatever. But okay, well, he came into the league hurt, missed like all of training camp. And like, that's really big for a rookie. And then he had, the gambling suspension and stuff in year 2. But I mean, part of the reason why I created the Coachspeak Index is to know when these coaches say stuff like, should we believe them or not? And Dan Campbell has a really great history of being reliable with his Coachspeak. So when he was saying that Jameson Williams, like he's on the rise, then I was like, okay, I'm on board, Dan. And it proved to be true. He had a really big breakout year last year. And now this drumbeat is getting even louder for this year for Jameson Williams. And once again, people are saying, no, can't do it. He already broke out last year. His ceiling can't get any higher than it was last year. Well, these guys here are telling you that it can. The way that Sean Payton is obsessed with size at wide receiver, well, it sounds like John Morton, the offensive coordinator for the Lions, is obsessed with speed on offense. And that's why he's talking about Jahmyr Gibbs and Jameson Williams and how he's never seen anyone so fast and explosive since Reggie Bush. And man, when I hear this, what you're saying about Jameson Williams getting in the slot, like I'm just seeing them like, let's get the ball to JMO. Let's get him as many layup targets as possible, because he has just unbelievable speed. And we saw this a couple of years ago in the playoff game against, I think it was the Niners. They give him that little sweep, and he's just gone like immediately. As soon as he gets the ball, you're like, all right, he's gone. He's gone. I mean, it's a house call. And like, how can you not utilize that? John Morton wants to utilize that. And Dan Campbell and John Morton are both saying like, yeah, he looks unbelievable. He looks even better than he was last year. And people are saying, no, it can't happen. The ceiling has been reached. Well, you know what? Maybe the ceiling has not been reached for Jameson Williams. Let's maybe believe these guys here. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs as well is going to be, I mean, he's going to be used a lot more than he was in previous seasons.
Yeah, we're going from a slot obsessed OC to a speed obsessed OC. And it's still, like a great offensive line. And, you lose some key coaches, but just in terms of players, a lot of cohesion. So yeah, one of the best offenses in football for a number of years now. And, maybe it's just as simple as you tweak who the focus is and you just have a different guy. Now you have Jameson, being one of the best ADP beaters that exists.
Yeah. And you said it, Amon-Ra St. Brown, very, very good wide receiver, but going very high in drafts. I've taken a little bit of him, but executing a bit of a soft fade because like Ben Johnson is gone. People are saying like, oh, Ben Johnson is gone. So the offense is, they're basically saying the offense is going to change. The offense will be different. The offense will be worse. But like when we're saying the offense is going to be different, the offense might be different in the way that it's the slot receiver is not the focal point here anymore. Like Amon-Ra in the slot may not be the focal point. He'll still get his share of targets. I'm sure he'll do good stuff with it, but like maybe it's not going to be the massive amount of targets that we've seen in the past there. Moving on to Jacksonville. The Jaguars now have Liam Cohen as their head coach and offensive play caller. Basically what we saw in Tampa last year was a lot of the screen game, a lot of vertical shots as well. He's like incredible at scheming these receivers or those receivers for the Bucs wide open. You would see guys just running like 15, 20 yards open down the field, whether it's Jalen McMillan or Mike Evans. And now he is in Jacksonville. Recently, he was talking about Travis Hunter playing this F role when they're in 11 personnel, saying that he's working on the Z role in 12 personnel, but he's playing a lot of F, which was the Cooper Kupp role when Liam Cohen was with the Rams. And then last year, when Liam Cohen became the offensive coordinator, he was saying that Chris Godwin, we want to move him back inside. We want him to play the F role that Cooper Kupp was playing. And now recently we get this quote from Liam Cohen saying that, well, it's going to be, it's Travis Hunter right now in the F role. And then in their preseason game the other night, we saw Travis Hunter play a lot in the slot there. What are your vibes on this Jags offense this year?
Yeah, so I think this is a little funny just because, earlier this offense is like, I'm just going to be all in on whatever team Liam Cohen goes to, whatever team Ben Johnson goes to. And then, I've been a big Trevor Lawrence hater for a long time, very critical of Caleb last year. So I'm really being tested here. Excuse me, but no, I am very bullish on this offense. I will say, in particular, for sure, very bullish on BTJ. I've been flirting with putting him above, dare I say, Justin Jefferson. You look at so we talked about Ben Johnson, slot wide receiver. It's possible the Liam Cohen slot wide receiver is more valuable than the Ben Johnson slot wide receiver. You look at what Chris Godwin did last year in the slot. I think this is really interesting. The most fantasy points per route run from the slot in fantasy points data history. 1 is Brian Thomas Jr., 2 is Chris Godwin last year. But yeah, he finished behind only Jamar Chase in fantasy points per game. People forget it. He really like cucked Mike Evans until that injury happened. Mike Evans was wide receiver 31, 13.6 fantasy points per game. Really wasn't great. And then he got hurt, and then Mike Evans became the wide receiver 1, was, top 5 in fantasy points per game. You look at 2022, when Cooper Kupp was healthy, he was putting up 25 fantasy points per game, which, easy wide receiver 1 numbers. You look at Wan'Dale Robinson, who is like, as a Giants fan, like one of my least favorite players of all time, dead last in EPA per target. Like, he's so awful. And I hate how he's used, but 2021 at Kentucky with Liam Cohen, I think you rank like top 5 among all power conference wide receivers in fantasy points per game, all in the slot, this like undersized former running back out of nowhere, just going nuclear. And so, yeah, Travis Hunter, the quote was the F, but we did see BTJ get about, what was it, a 40% slot route share, which is massive for a guy who, again, set the record in slot fantasy points per route run with only a 28% route share. I'll let you clean this up for me towards the end, but I believe there was a quote, something very early on, where it's like, I'm not going to sleep easy at night if I don't get BTJ double-digit targets every week. There was something like that.
Yeah.
And then there was
targets.
also, go ahead.
Yeah. It was at like a fan night event pretty early after he got hired. And, they were asking him about the offense and everything, like what'll it look like? And he was like, basically get the ball to our best players. And this was before the draft. And he said, I'll be able to go to bed knowing that we got Brian Thomas Jr. 10 targets and Tank Bigsby, 20 carries, and Travis Etienne 20 carries. It was really funny because he's like 40 carries for the running backs and 10 targets for Brian Thomas Jr. And what was really interesting in that clip was that it seemed like when he was talking about Travis Etienne, it seemed like he was first going to say, like, we want to like throw him the ball this many times, but then he like quickly kind of transitioned to like saying carries instead of targets or like throws. At that same event, I thought about tweeting this out because it's pretty incredible how like prescient it was. But they asked him, like, what are you going to do with the number 5 pick? And he said, well, we want to be physical on defense, but we want to light up the scoreboard as well. And they end up taking Travis Hunter, who plays on both sides of the ball. So he like kind of nailed it right there with what he was saying. But yeah, he made a big point this offseason. He also talked about it today in his press conference, how, Brian Thomas Jr., like, it's not last year was a surprise how much he broke out. Like, the league was not expecting him to be one of the top receivers when defenses were playing against him. He said that's no longer the case. He can't surprise anyone before. Like, he put the league on notice last year. So he's going to get a lot of double coverage, cloud coverage. And a big point for the Jags was making sure that they bring in some other players, some other receivers on offense who will alleviate some of that, the like defensive focus. And they get De'Ami Brown, who's like kind of a field stretcher, vertical threat, but also, good in the screen game. And then of course they draft Travis Hunter, who, we just mentioned is playing a lot of slot for them. It's like all 3 of these receivers are very good in the screen game. They also have, like some deep speed as well. And obviously Brian Thomas Jr., I mean, really all 3 of them to an extent are like pretty good with the ball in the air, like ball hawks. Obviously, Travis Hunter's ball skills are like elite. Yeah, I think it could be a super exciting offense. Like you've said, I mean, Trevor Lawrence scares me a little bit. Like, this guy was supposed to be a can't miss prospect coming into the NFL. And he does, I mean, he obviously has the tools, but it's surprising how many just like wide open receivers he's missing all the time. And then when you get into the red zone, he just seems to short circuit and just abominable mistakes that he makes. Like it's like the closer they get to the goal line, it's like the end zone is made of kryptonite, and the closer they get to it, like the weaker Trevor Lawrence gets. And like, you can tell that Liam Cohen is really working big time on like his footwork. He was talking the other day about like just like positioning when you're throwing the ball, that you need to be positioned like a boxer, right? When you're like a boxer's throwing a punch, like the most effective punch comes from when you're in the right stance, right? And it's kind of the same way for a quarterback. So if he is this sort of quarterback whisperer, which, you know, Doug Peterson was kind of supposed to be, we saw him win a Super Bowl with Nick Foles there, right? And so what happened with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence? Like, was Doug Peterson just like completely checked out? It seemed maybe he was. I remember last year, like maybe the most happy and like really focused I saw Doug Peterson was when he was talking about how like a golf match that had just happened. He was like, "Hey, you guys see the golf match this weekend?" And it was talking about like the mindset of a golfer. You know, people say, "Oh, well, look what Liam Cohen did with Baker Mayfield last year." Well, we actually kind of saw that Baker Mayfield resurgence the prior season with Dave Canales. So I'm not, you know, putting really any of that on Liam Cohen. I mean, obviously Liam Cohen did a good enough job with Baker Mayfield to like kind of keep him at that same level. I think Cohen's superpower really was just kind of, like I said, scheming these wide receivers open and like what he's able to do with a combination of the screen game and the vertical game, which super, super dangerous. Like, hell, let's get him to Kansas City and let him run that Patrick Mahomes offense with Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce there. But I mean, I've taken a decent amount of Trevor Lawrence just because, you know, some faith in Liam Cohen, also because of the receivers that they have there. And like there's just no other option for them. Like they're going to have to roll with T-Law this year.
I can't help but dogpile just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The guy is only by total salary, only Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are making more. He's tied with Joe Burrow. And there's never been a year of his career where he's had a higher QBR than Derek Carr, who is retired. That's my benchmark for like, you're not playing well. That was my Patrick Mahomes deep passing touchdown stat. He struggles to move through his progressions. I've tweeted about this for a while. You had the quote, the coach talked about this. Our guy, Brett Whitefield, talks about his lack of maneuverability in the pocket. He says, baby giraffe feet, where it's just like awkward and like gangly. And this is a great play caller. I'm a true believer in Liam Cohen. You saw what he did with Will Levis, who's like one of the worst NFL quarterbacks I've ever seen play football. You saw Baker Mayfield never finished top 15 in fantasy points per game, finished fourth best, looked amazing last year. I know, to be fair, I think Baker is a better quarterback than T-Law. I also think he had a top 3 offensive line and an elite supporting cat. Well, a lot of injuries to the receivers, but anyway, like you said, the screen game is massive. You have a bunch of guys who are good at screens. Ben Johnson's Lions led the league in the Bears, Caleb Williams led the league in screen pass attempts, but it was Liam Cohen's Buccaneers who led in screen receiving yards. So going to be a very screen heavy offense, which is great for fantasy football. It really bolsters your fantasy floor and makes you more consistent on a week to week basis. Like I said, I'm flirting with the idea of pushing BTJ above Justin Jefferson in my rankings, but I really wanted to come on the show to talk to you about Travis Hunter. So yeah. I am a true believer in Travis Hunter's talents. You could read my rookie prospect article on this. How convicted am I or insane am I? If Travis Hunter wins MVP at 300-1 odds, I am going to be a millionaire. That is how much money I put down on Travis Hunter to win MVP. Hey, guess what? It's a free roll because he just won me a bunch of money last year when he won Heisman. But I am not as bullish from a fantasy perspective. And I'll tell you my fear, which, certainly today, as opposed to 2 weeks ago, seems a little more unfounded. I was just so worried he would be irrationally like a 2 series on, 1 series off guy, both on offense and defense. I figured, he's probably not getting the screens because, you don't want to waste that on a guy who's maybe tired from just playing a 12-play drive on defense. And like, it's just so hard to be a true fantasy difference maker when you have a capped route share. Like if he is a 60% route share guy, it's just so hard to be a fantasy difference maker. But I know Ryan Heath vehemently disagrees with me. Jake disagrees with me. I think you disagree with me. And so I'd like to hear it. I like wonder if part of this is just like the psychology of, I'm already protected from the tail event in Casey's offense. I win $1 million. But yeah. So where are you at on Travis Hunter from a fantasy perspective?
I think he plays a ton on offense.
Because one other thing, the coach said himself 80%. Thinks he's better on defense than offense. That doesn't scare you?
No. I mean, he says that Travis Hunter is more natural at cornerback, and I mean, there's just more to learn, especially like with a Liam Cohen offense, than there is just like as a corner, right? So especially when you're trying to teach him like new positions on offense, like they have him playing the F role right now, but they're also like trying to teach him Z in 12 personnel. So that's why he's spent like a ton of time on offense during OTAs. This is a guy who's just so incredibly dangerous on offense, incredible ball skills, which helps him on offense and defense. He played like 111 plus snaps per game in college. I think something that people aren't talking about enough is the fact that he played like half of those games in Colorado at an elevation of 5,400 feet. And now in the NFL, he's playing at a stadium where it's like 10 feet above sea level. So like much, much easier to breathe. Everyone who
I didn't think of that. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's crazy. He had that cardio.
Yeah.
Despite the elevation. Wow. Like, I don't know if you watch UFC, but anyone who watches UFC knows that's massive. The Mexico City fights, just destroying gas tanks. Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So, everybody who has ever come into contact with this guy just raves about how he just does not get tired. And so I think also when people are saying, oh, he's going to get injured. Well, listen, he's not playing linebacker. He's playing corner when he's on defense. The props for tackles on corners in NFL games is usually like 3.5 tackles for a game. It's not a lot of tackling. Linebackers completely different, but he's on the perimeter. He's outside. It's mainly just like cardio stuff. It's really offense that you need to be worried about because he's going to be taking hits on offense. Liam Cohen said, hey, like to play him 80% of the snaps on offense. I don't know. I mean,
wait, he said that?
He did. Yeah. I tweeted that one out about a week or so ago. I think it was either Kay Adams or Rich Eisen show. It was on one of those. They asked him, it was Rich Eisen. It was Rich Eisen. And Rich Eisen was like, we want to know the snap count. This is what I love about watching, like, not just press conferences, but media interviews, especially Rich Eisen and Kay Adams, because they're really good at getting information out of people. And Rich Eisen asked him about, hey, everybody wants to know
I remember this
snap count. And he said, ideally about 80% on offense. I think whatever his route share is going to be higher, right? Because he'll be like, there will be running plays where he's not out on the field, but they'll have to put him out there enough to where it's not a tip off, right? Like whether he's on or on the field, like whether it might be a pass or a run play. They traded a bag for this dude. They traded so many assets away for him. They're not just playing him on defense. And I think what we'll end up seeing is like he'll obviously be in on like high leverage defensive snaps, like third and longs, that sort of thing, where you need like a good ball hawking corner. But I mean, Liam Cohen last year ran the 8th most 11 personnel in the NFL. He is not going to be trotting out Brian Thomas Jr., De'Ami Brown, and Parker Washington all game long. Like, that's fucking ridiculous. Like, if you think that's the case, grow some brains, my friend. Travis Hunter is going to be out there quite a bit on offense. And, you know, he'll, of course, play less snaps than Brian Thomas Jr. does. But like when he is out there, like he will have more schemed stuff. Like they're not like just putting him out there like, all right, here's some more offensive stuff, right? Like he'll be out there with a purpose for them. And again, he's a really, really good wide receiver. I think Matt Harmon comped him to like prime Odell Beckham. Like that's kind of his like ceiling comp there, and like one that's, you know, like reasonably close. So yeah, like you have a weapon on that on offense. You're not going to leave that on the bench. Give me a break. He's going to play so many snaps on offense this year. I'm very much in on him. Like it's baked into his price already. If he was just a wide receiver, if he was just playing wide receiver, he'd be like a 3rd, 4th round pick.
How many? Yeah, I think like part of it is like you look at the depth chart, like you said, De'Ami Brown, Parker Washington, Trenton Irwin, Josh Cephas. And like it's to the point where like even if a cornerback goes down, like I think it makes more sense to keep him on offense. But how many snaps are you envisioning for him on defense?
I mean, defense is a little bit tougher, and I think that's also more fluid when you're looking at like game script. You know, that's obviously going to play a factor. Like if they're in, you know, blowouts or, you know, either way, like he's not going to play a lot on defense there. I'm not. I feel pretty good about him playing like 70+% on offense. I'm not 100% sure what the defensive stuff will be. I think it will be a lot of the, you know, 3rd and long, high leverage defensive snaps. But beyond that, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
So is it still 300-1 for MVP?
DraftKings Sportsbook, guys. I drove out with the wife yesterday, 2.5 hour drive there and then back 2.5, and just to place this bet.
Wow, I love it. That's great. Yeah, they asked in that same Rich Eisen interview, Rich Eisen said, "Do you think he can win offensive and defensive Rookie of the Year?" He said, "Yes."
I mean, if he does that, he's probably winning MVP. Like last year, if Brian Thomas Jr. was like Deontay Banks also as a cornerback, like that beats out Josh Allen for MVP, I think, or at least it comes close enough to where I can cash out big.
Yeah, I think it would take like 1,200-ish yards on offense, like 7 touchdowns, and then what, like 3 pick sixes and a couple.
I was gonna say like 3 to 4 to 5 interceptions, maybe.
Yeah, it's just so hard to win it over a quarterback.
So I don't know that it is, because like the novelty of it and the talking points, like everyone on ESPN is going to be making this argument. And like this is the other thing too. Like if you're in like 2 start sit leagues and like you really care and root for your players, there's no one more fun or exciting to have on your team than Travis Hunter. Like the one game he gets a pick 6 and also gets a touchdown and 100 yards is like the funnest thing ever. But yeah, you're going to have these talking heads like Mina Kimes is going to be like, well, you know, like is the best quarterback more valuable than a top 10 wide receiver who's also a top 10 cornerback?
Mhm.
Because that's two players in one. Now that just totally changes the equation. And as a bonus, if you tail me on this, I'm going to be influencing everyone. I'm going to be putting out Travis Hunter hype tweets. I'm going to be like, you're an idiot if you don't vote for him for MVP.
Yeah.
So you have that along. And by the way, I had Lamar Jackson to win MVP at 101 odds his sophomore season. I had Brock Purdy 101 odds to win MVP his sophomore season. He didn't win it, but he was like a minus 300 favorite week 14
Against the Ravens.
Yeah, where I hedged and said bet Lamar at plus 300. So you came out a massive winner, especially if you cashed out early. But yeah.
Yeah, I had Lamar for MVP both of those seasons.
No way.
I tailed you on the first one, and then on that second one, it was just like this is a Lamar MVP year.
Shout out to Ed Teach, who won over $1 million on Lamar to win MVP that sophomore season.
That's the same guy that made the Tom Brady bet, right?
Yeah, he's such a legend. He's retired now, but he's the man.
Yeah,
I told him about my Travis Hunter bet. He said he liked it.
That's awesome. I love that. Let's talk about the Los Angeles Rams head coach Sean McVay. This was right after their 2024 season ended. This was, I believe, his end of season presser. Said that he envisions, quote, a little bit more versatility, end quote, in his 2025 offense. He noted how impressed he was by the variety of personnel groupings and runs in Liam Cohen's 2024 Bucs offense. And then general manager Les Snead said in a May 1st interview on the Rich Eisen show, quote, "We do think the way this NFL season's going, the amount of wear and tear that goes into playing running back, that having a committee and a committee with different skill sets only helps us continue being able to run the football like we want to run it," end quote. What do you think about the chances of the Rams actually employing a sort of running back by committee and kind of changing up this offense to how it's looked in recent seasons?
Yeah. I think what we're going to get is Kyren, the Uber bell cow, same as always. Blake Corum, just a pure cuff. Maybe he gets one drive per game and that's it, like last year. And then we see Jarquez Hunter get maybe 6 to 9 carries per game, all between the 20s. Because McVay has rightfully griped that they're missing an explosive element in the run game. I love Jarquez Hunter, by the way. He was one of the players I was higher on than just about anyone else. And I think that's like the perfect role for him. So I don't see this hurting Kyren too much because like that's where so much of his value came from. He's led the league in XFP per game and fantasy points per game inside the red zone in each of the last 2 seasons. He was top 3 in fantasy points per game 2 years ago. Last year, he wasn't that high. But one of the notes I had was he had the toughest strength of schedule of any running back. And if you adjusted for that, he would have been top 5 in fantasy points per game pretty easy. And so I kind of don't think this hurts him too much personally, because he's still maintaining, the valuable red zone role. If Matthew Stafford should miss any time, we have this weird back thing going on. I think he'll start seeing more target volume. Stafford never targets running backs. Jimmy G does at a little higher level. But like, to me, the bottom line is like if Sean McVay doesn't love Kyren, why did he name his firstborn son Kyren McVay? Right. That's not actually a thing, but like you, how many times have you heard, Sean McVay just like randomly asked about a linebacker, talk about how much he loves Kyren?
He talks about Kyren unprompted quite a bit. He's done it each of the past 2 seasons in their NFL draft press conference, like after they select a running back. Like last season, they drafted Blake Corum, and they're like, "Why'd you draft Blake Corum?" He was like, "Well, he reminded us a lot of Kyren Williams," and then talked about Kyren Williams. And then this past NFL draft, they draft Jarquez Hunter, and again, Sean McVay goes into talking about Kyren Williams. It is very noticeable to me, though. So last year, after the draft, they asked Les Snead about, hey, what does this Blake Corum pick mean for Kyren Williams? And he said, it's really more about just making sure that we're able to keep Kyren fresh, and that, we can take him out of the game for a breather, and, make sure he stays fresh. That's very different from what Les Snead said in May about, that having a committee with different skill sets helps us. And Jarquez Hunter bringing a different run style than Blake Corum and Kyren Williams, I think is kind of a big thing. And coupling that with McVay talking about how much he admired Liam Cohen's Bucs offense last year, an offense that ran, pony personnel and used different types of running backs there. Makes me wonder if they like what they see out of Jarquez Hunter and, during training camp and during the preseason. Is he able to take like a nice little chunk, right? Blake Corum still gets his drive. Maybe he gets 2 drives a game. And then Jarquez Hunter is also mixed in. I think Kyren Williams still the clear RB1 for LA. Like they still love him. They just paid him that contract. But if he goes from this 85% snap share down to like 70%, and him not being a super efficient running back, I think that can hurt his fantasy value a lot to where he's going in kind of that 3rd round this year.
Yeah. To me, maybe this is just vibes. To me, he's just like the new James Conner, where he's just like undervalued and underappreciated every year. I will say I'm probably doing the same thing. I don't think I'm too high on him. I think I'm like RB 13. It's like not really a target for me. Do you know where he's going in best ball?
Yeah, I think his ADP is right around 36, so right at the end of the 3rd round. And I mean, I would almost rather have James Conner, who's going several rounds later. Yeah. Let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings real quick. It's not really any coach speak here, as not any recent, at least. There was some last season, but it's more kind of their actions of like, you could tell how frustrated that Kevin O'Connell has been with not having a good second running back. Like he really wanted Ty Chandler to be that dude. And it became apparent to him last season that Ty Chandler is not that dude.
Yeah.
And the Vikings go out and they get Ryan Kelly and Will Fries for their offensive line in free agency. They have 2 really good tight ends, and they rave about Josh Oliver all the time and just how he's like the best blocking tight end in the league. They get Jordan Mason, which Kevin O'Connell said, like, I was doing backflips when we got him, because like this run game with Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones, it's like I'm in heaven with these 2 guys here. I think they could run the ball more this year. I think they'll still be, pass rate over expected type of team. But when you look at how good that defense is for Minnesota, could absolutely see them kind of the same way last year when they have these leads and they're just trying to salt games away in the 4th quarter, and they have like Cam Akers out there just run after run after run. Now they can do that with Jordan Mason. JJ McCarthy, it's his first actual year playing in the NFL. He's like a spiritual rookie, basically. What do you think the chances are that we see them tilt, like not be a run heavy team, but just like tilting towards the run a little bit more.
No, I think that's absolutely the case. I think that's what they do. And I think part of it is like, you look at JJ McCarthy, like what worked for him in college. In his final season, I know they won it all that year, but he averaged 16 pass attempts per game. Michael Penix was at 37 pass attempts per game. And so, when you have a rookie, a spiritual rookie, you do want to go run heavy, maybe especially in JJ McCarthy's case, just based on what he did in college. They have a good offensive line. I for sure see them doing that. I just kind of think this offense is going to be awesome though. When you have a Jordan Addison, you have a Justin Jefferson, a TJ Hawkinson, and Aaron Jones, I think is really good. Jordan Mason.
Very good offensive line. Like that, just even before the upgrades, like 2 really good tackles, especially in Darisaw.
That was like a top 3 EPA per play offense before Darisaw went down last year.
Yeah. He was that was a very big piece for them to lose in 2024. All right, let's talk about just a few possible changes when it comes to personnel in the NFL this year that could affect fantasy. First is Justin Herbert, who, I mean, you know better. You and I know better than anybody how much Jim Harbaugh adores Justin Herbert, somebody that he referred to as field corn.
What?
The past year? Yeah, he said he's not. He said he's not a house plant. I believe house plant was the word he said. He said he's field corn. He just like burrows into the ground and his roots are strong. And then also said that I would go to the gates of hell and back for Justin Herbert. Absolutely loves this dude. The work ethic, Harbaugh said he wakes up every day just striving to match Justin Herbert's level. So on June 6th, offensive coordinator Greg Roman said in an interview, I think we'll see Justin Herbert use his legs a bit more this year. He can really affect the game with his legs. It creates so much stress on the defense when they have to defend that. That was off the table most of last year because of his foot and ankle injury. And then said, we'll definitely have some QB-driven run game stuff available. How much of it we do will be dependent on what we need to win the game. This all, of course, before the Rashawn Slater injury. Are you buying Justin Herbert using his legs more this season?
So absolutely I am. I did just want to ask you a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there who are your favorite play callers to listen to? Is it Harbaugh 1?
Well, he's not the, just like coaches or press conferences or
I'm sorry.
Yes. Jim Harbaugh is number 1. He's incredible. I love him.
Cause we went back and forth on this where like first of all, he's the most insane, most interesting man in the world. Like he just like unprompted talks about like SpongeBob and Judge Judy and like how he admires their, honesty and vigilance and like what, and like there is like such a cult around Hart and like the different stories you hear from players and people about him. I have a thread on this, and I know you've seen it from the press conferences, but yeah, like we cannot understate here his obsession with Justin Herbert. I've said he talks about Herbert the way Christians talk about Jesus Christ. There was that one quote where he was like, I wake up every morning trying to be a better coach so I can live up to Justin Herbert, and every player on this team needs to do the same thing. Like, This is the superstar of all superstars they believe they have on their team. So like Justin Herbert's not my Exodia quarterback this year. This is just like my favorite must draft quarterback. My hit rates on that has been really good for a number of years. People, wait in anticipation for who that is. And I will say he was like really strongly one of the runner-ups just because, like, again, Harbaugh loves him. I think the supporting cast is great. They did just lose Rashawn Slater. They did just get Keenan Allen. But again, like, I just think this is a really talented player. Everyone thinks they're going to go super run heavy, but again, Harbaugh is obsessed with him. And so the question you asked was, does he run more? And that's just like massive for fantasy football. It's just such a potent cheat code. Rich Rebar calls it the Konami code. And so you have that track record from Greg Roman, where he has all these hypermobile quarterbacks. You have freakish athleticism from Justin Herbert, where you just like stack them up right next to Josh Allen. They look like the exact same player, except Justin Herbert is faster in the 40-yard dash. He's an inch taller, at the same weight, jumps higher, jumps farther. And you have all these quotes backing it up. And so QB 17 on Underdog, I really kind of went back and forth on this. And kind of what swayed me, like, it's very rare to see a quarterback just come out of nowhere year 5 and, start running a ton. He has been great whenever he has been asked to run. Only Lamar Jackson has more 25 plus yard runs over the last 2 seasons. And there's plenty of quarterbacks with way more rushing attempts than Herbert over that span. But what it came down to for me, and again, I really agonized over this. I watched his highlights as a runner over and over and over again. And I just kind of didn't see the game breaking upside. If he does outscore my Exodia quarterback, I'm never going to forgive myself. But yeah, just a player I'm super high on. Harbaugh's super high on. Greg Roman super high on. Is going to for sure run more this year, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. I mean, they obviously this is a guy who they don't want to get hurt. I think Herbert is smart enough to, go down and not seek out contact like we see some of these quarterbacks do, especially some of the younger quarterbacks. I mean, it's just about like adding dimensions to your offense. Like that's necessary, right? If he is never running, then teams can just know, like, okay, well, he's just not gonna run, right? Like if we could have the Kyler Murray conversation, which maybe we'll just keep that online. But yeah, like you would think that they would kind of want to follow through with this, and people looking at last year again might miss the context of, yeah, he was super hobbled for much of the season. So of course, like, we're not going to see a lot of running there. But I mean, man, when you add that dimension of his game to that offense, it's so awful that Rashawn Slater went down, because I think this offense could have like cooked at a super high level with him. I think they could still be okay. They're moving Joe Alt to left tackle. This is a guy that, like, they gush about Justin Herbert. They're going crazy as well for Joe Alt and about like how good he looks. Like he's even better than last year, and basically saying this guy's already a lock for the Hall of Fame. And so, their swing tackle, Trey Pipkins, is going to be coming in at right tackle now. Wasn't great last year, but maybe like an kind of average-ish NFL starting tackle, maybe just below, but like certainly not the absolute worst. I think they'll kind of have to use his legs. Like, they might not game plan it like, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson and that kind of stuff. But
I think it'd be like Josh Allen. I think they kind of alluded to it too, where it's like, it depends on the game, right? If like we're behind and like we need Herbert, we need Josh Allen to be Superman, go ahead and start running. But, more conservative games, or you have a lead, probably, you're not going to unleash him to that degree.
Yeah. And it helps so much that he's not a quarterback that you, like, obviously the rushing helps, but like you're not banking on that. And you're also not having to pay that price for him in fantasy this year. By the way, I'm not going to reveal your Exodia quarterback. Everyone should go read Scott's article at Fantasy Points. I am very happy was very happy reading that and seeing the Exodia quarterback, because he is my highest drafted quarterback
Oh, hell
on
yeah.
Underdog. I've got like 24% of
Nice.
him. And well, this is a spoiler, but Trevor Lawrence is actually my second
Oh, okay.
highest exposure, just because he's going so late. Like
Yeah,
getting
he
a lot
is. He is.
in the like 130s on Underdog, and I have a lot of like, I've got like, I think 12% Brian Thomas Jr., 14% Travis Hunter, like 14% De'Ami Brown. I've got, I don't know, like 20% Bashal Tutin. So it just makes sense to have a lot of Trevor Lawrence there. Moving on to Josh Jacobs. Green Bay head coach Matt LaFleur has long had this philosophy of using multiple running backs. So it was very striking to me when on July 23rd, he was asked whether he would be comfortable giving Josh Jacobs a huge workload again this season. And I was expecting like this old, just like same rehashed answer that he always gives about, well, my philosophy with running backs, all the wear and tear, and you want to have multiple guys. That is not what Matt LaFleur said on July 23rd. He said, we'll just let it play out. A lot of it is dependent upon the health of the player. Quote, I think he's a guy that's proven that he can handle the load. So it's going to be just dependent upon his health. End quote. And we know what LaFleur thinks of Josh Jacobs. Last year, he referred to two players as an animal. One of them was Tucker Kraft. The other was Josh Jacobs. They gave him a big workload last season. Josh Jacobs did really well with it. It was one of those situations where, he didn't like practice a ton during the season, kind of like the same thing that we saw in Tennessee with Tony Pollard, because they were just using him so much. And it's like, all right, well, take the entire week to rest up, and then come game day, like you're going to have another big workload again. What do you think about Josh Jacobs' Uber bell cow season?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Like last year I was saying, like, honestly, I thought he was one of the worst picks you could make. I think he just like ran really, really hot, where you had the Jordan Love injury, where Jordan Love has talked about this. Matt LaFleur has talked about it. They both refer to it as a lost season for him, where that pass rate over expectation really plummeted, especially in the red zone, actually. And then you had Marshawn Lloyd play like 6 snaps when they hyped him up like crazy all offseason. I can't imagine how many best ball shares you had. I had a ton. They were talking about him as like, oh no, this is our Aaron Jones, like Josh Jacobs is our AJ Dillon. And so that guy plays like it. So like my only question as like still a spiritual hater would be like, when did he say this? Did this come like right after yet another Marshawn Lloyd injury? But no, I think like I'm capitulating. I moved Josh Jacobs way up in my rankings. Reluctantly, but I did.
Yeah, I mean, if Marshawn Lloyd is healthy, I think they absolutely would want to use him. I don't think it would be a situation that maybe they were envisioning last year of the old like Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams type thing, where you're really like kind of splitting up the workload. I think it would be more kind of like change of pace and that kind of stuff, and just like, hey, let's get him in here. Like LaFleur talks about Marshawn Lloyd being a nightmare matchup for opponents. So, using him as kind of like a specialty back, could definitely see that. But yeah, I believe this is the last year of his 2-year contract with the Packers, Josh Jacobs. So like may as well just load this guy up with all he can handle, and showed out really well for them last year. And there's really, like who's to say it can't happen again this season. Final one that we'll talk about here as far as personnel and wrapping this show up is James Conner and Trey Benson. And what I want to do real quick is go through this timeline of comments on this Cardinals backfield, because it's been a really hot topic as of late. May 28th, Head coach Jonathan Gannon says James Conner is getting himself ready to carry the load for us. July 25th, Gannon was asked whether Trey Benson can take a little more off of James Conner's workload this year. Gannon said, quote, "We'll put whoever out there we think can get it done. We acquired him for a reason. I feel really good about him. That whole room is doing a good job. There's major competition in that room because we've got some good backs, and they all have different skill sets." So he's asked about Benson, and kind of a layup answer would be like, yeah, sure, he can take some of this workload off. And then he starts talking about the rest of the running back room. Not the greatest sign. July 27th, Jonathan Gannon said, "I feed off of James Conner's energy a ton. I think our team does as well. His play style leads to that. It looks good when he's running through people's faces. Guys get juiced about that." The very next day, offensive coordinator Drew Petzing was asked whether James Conner is still the workhorse back. He said, quote, "Absolutely. I think James has proven that over the last couple years, just the way he carries the ball and what he brings to the offense. I think that's always going to be the case," end quote. Then Petzing went on to say, "I certainly feel like there's other guys in that room that can carry some of that load and have a big impact on offense, Trey Benson being one of them." Then Petzing was asked whether he anticipates Trey Benson having a bigger role than last year. Petzing answered, quote, "Yes and no. I think a lot of that is going to be predicated on what we're doing in a given game, what we're trying to accomplish, and again, what we're seeing on defense," end quote. Then on August 2nd, James Conner said about Trey Benson that, quote, "We're both RB1. He's going to play a lot this year," end quote. And then everyone took that and were like, look, I told you, two RB1s, right? Because James Conner said it, who I guess is the play caller there. August 5th, 3 days later, Jonathan Gannon, head coach, was asked whether the message from the coaching staff to James Conner and Trey Benson has been that the Cardinals have two running back ones. Gannon said, quote, "Not from me. It's compete for your role." Probably what they're alluding to, both of those guys, is they both want to play and they both think they can impact the game in a positive way. And I agree with them, end quote. And then finally on August 9th, Kyler Murray said, quote, "I think this will be a big breakout year for Trey," end quote. So we get another quote from a player saying that they think it'll be a big breakout year for him. And while the coaches are saying kind of a different thing, and people are siding with the players, saying that like, yep, these are the guys. These are the guys that are controlling this offense. What's your take on this Cardinals backfield?
Yeah, so let me give you my timeline. So Matthew Berry releases this article every year. It's excellent. The hit rate's really good. It's like things I learned at the combine, which is just like, I imagine him at the bar with like the running backs coach and just being like, "Hey, who's the guy this year?" And this was his quote. "Conner is still the bell cow. They love him." That's his quote. And then I've seen, every quote that you just referenced because I'm in your Discord. But another quote is, "I asked you about this, and your quote to me was, I think they want to build a statue in honor of James Conner. Gannon hit us with the if Trey Benson takes the leap." And so this was like a month or so ago. And all the other positive stuff, he's going to carry the load for us. But you had this James Conner quote where like everyone's losing faith, and now people think it's a committee. And if you're keeping the faith that James Conner's the guy, I'm with you. I'm telling you. And we have all this supporting evidence in favor of that. I don't think it makes sense to, just like James Conner being nice at a press conference and that's partly why you're the GOAT, is like, you don't just transcribe everything, but it's also like, you know who to trust. It's not the same thing as like a tweet where you just read the quote, but the question that was asked, like if there was a sarcastic tone. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm with you on James Conner.
Awesome, man. This was great. I think this was a super informative episode here. I think people are going to love it. Thank you so much for coming on, Scott. Please let us know what you got going on and where we can find you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Hopefully I didn't ramble too long. I know this is a 2-hour show. That's what I get for drinking a second coffee today, but I'm Scott Barrett. Check me out at fantasypoints.com, read my draft guide. We have the best data in the game, fantasy points data. We have a bunch of really cool things coming out. There's like a huge overlap between both of us. I don't know if you've seen it, but like your Discord, I see a ton of guys, who have the fantasy point sub, or people DMing me, and I see the Coachspeak Index Discord and the fantasy points Discord. So if you like Greg, you're probably going to like us. If you like me, you're probably going to like Greg.
Yeah. All right. Cool. That's it for us today. Thank you all for listening. Take it easy. Peace.